Dave has already done a session online, and he's the best to me, the bird ID expert in Asia. Yeah, not just shorebird, but all other birds. Yeah. So whenever a bird I don't know, I send to Dave.
So I'm the only thing standing between you and the bus back to the hotel. But you will notice that compared to this morning, two things are different. One is you have tables, and the other is that you have paper and pencils. And you know what that means? Work.
Yes.
Exactly right. Work. So, the title on the program was a refresher on waterbird identification and molt. But honestly, after the session on molt last time, I thought I better not go back there. But if you are still confused and you want to learn, there are those videos which I gave you a link to last time, and Ken encouraged me greatly. You can actually start saying, well, there were 200 sandpipers, there were 500 plovers, there were 30 herons, and even that is a better level of data than just lots of birds. This is just a bit of a recap. So when we look at which family, plover or sandpiper, online we looked at the way that plovers feed, and here's another example. So here's a plover, and if you look at the way it's feeding, very distinctive. It pulls out a worm, then it stops, it looks. Maybe it's listening as well. It's by itself, doesn't like to have company. And eventually it will find another prey. So even if the bird is just a dot on the horizon, even if you can see no feather detail at all, if you can watch the way they feed, you can immediately say, oh, that's a plover, just by the way it's feeding. So I said last time that the feeding action of plovers is distinctive. It's the stop, look, run, peck, catch, eat. And they may be very rapid, or they may be slow. Depends on their prey. If they're crab eaters, they'll do it fast. If they're worm eaters, they'll do it slow. But basically it's the same action with all the plovers. And if we contrast that with the sandpipers, the Scolopacidae, here is one, and just watch the way this bird feeds. This is one of the sandpiper group. First of all, you'll notice there are other birds around it. It doesn't mind company. And you can see it's a completely different feeding action from the plovers. It's just probing constantly in the water, probably locating prey by feel, so the end of the bill is sensitive. And actually we can see this in the structure of the bird. The eye is relatively small. The bill is much finer and more delicate. So again, even if you can't see any detail, if you can see these birds probing like this constantly, then you can tell it's it's one of the Scolopacidae family. So the feeding action for these birds, it's probing or picking rapidly and constantly. Again, it can be rapid or slow depending on the individual species. And again, the prey determines feeding action. So some birds may probe a long time in one spot. Some may walk and pick as they move along. So if we can narrow it down to a plover, let's start with a plover. There are only really 3 groups divided into 4 genera. Until recently it was 3, it's now 4. But immediately you can divide all those possible species down into basically 3 groups. We have the lapwings, the large lapwings, and then the medium-sized larger plovers, which belong to the genus Pluvialis, and then the smaller plovers, which are Charadrius and Anahicus. If we look at each of these in turn, lapwings live in grasslands, paddy fields. They're large, long-legged, and they have colourful legs, eyes and bill. and large white patches in the wing. So that's true of all the lapwings that we get in our region, I think. And they're also quite noisy. The larger plovers, which are, I would say, medium-sized, can live or can occur in grasslands, beaches, or mudflats. You'll notice that they're very streaky on the back here, and either greyish or black below. And in flight, it's important to notice the colour of the underwing. That's an important clue to the species. And again, these plovers, these larger plovers, have very distinctive calls. And we actually heard some a moment ago when we were out at the main hide, the Pacific golden plovers, which is one of this group, making that very fluty pew, and constantly talking to each other. And then the smaller plovers, again, beaches, mudflats, ponds. By contrast to the larger plovers, they're plain brown or fairly plain on the upper parts here, white underneath, and often they have a breast band or a patch at the side of the breast. In breeding plumage, or sometimes they have like a peach or a chestnut wash here. But they're very clearly brown and white with some kind of breast band or breast patch. So different from the larger plovers. These are small-sized plovers. And it's one of the important things to look for with these birds is whether it has a complete white line around the back of the neck here or not. That'll help you to narrow it down even further. Whether it has a white collar here or a brown. This one here does not have a white collar. It's brown all the way back, all the way down here. So that will help you again to narrow down the species. Looking at the other group, the Scolopacidae, there are essentially 5 groups. The XXL, curlews and whimbrels, and then the large size, godwits and dowitchers, and then the larger sandpipers and their allies. The main genus is the Tringa genus. They're known as the shanks. So you may have seen some red shanks a little while ago. And then the small ones, medium to small, the calidris sandpipers, which are smaller again, shorter legged, the bill is extremely long or very long, and again it's good to measure the length of the bill in comparison to the head. So the head is here, so 1, 2, 3, maybe three times the length of the head on this bird. And often the bill is pink at the base, if you can see it close enough. And they have a streaky head. Then the next group are the godwits, of which there are 2, and then dowitchers. These are also mudflat feeders. They have this very deep probing action that some people say looks like an old-fashioned sewing machine, going up and down like this. And the bill is generally straight or just slightly upturned, very long, almost 2 times the length, or probably 2 times the length of the head. And again, it may be pink-based. Yeah, so that's the godwits and dowitchers. And then moving on to the Tringa, or the larger sandpipers, medium-sized, both on the coast and inland. They have a rapid feeding action, probing, picking, or chasing, depending on whether they can hunt for fish, or they can hunt for small insects, or other small prey. They are elegant birds, as you can see from this photograph. Very relatively small head, long, slender body, and long legs. And their legs are often, usually, a distinctive color. It may be red, or orange, or yellow, or green, but not black. Always some color. And these birds also have loud, distinctive calls. Then moving on to the head. So the bill is straight or slightly upturned, about 1.5 times the head length, and often it's bicolored, so it's a different color at the base compared to the end. And they have a white throat generally. And then moving on to the smaller sandpipers, the calidris and allies. These also can occur both inland and on intertidal coastal areas. rapid probing picking action, down curved or straight, short or medium length bill, and superficially a little bit like plovers, because plovers also have a short bill, but notice the eye is much smaller and the bill is much thinner than a plover. Usually the bill is all dark, and yes, as I mentioned, the structure of the head is different from plovers. There's no shortcut around this. And one of my favorite sayings is this: expression improves impression. In other words, if you try to express what you see, whether in writing or in drawing or even in speaking, it will deepen the impression in your memory. So the best way to remember what you're learning is to try to express it in some way. So you should have a small egg next to a big egg. And remember, you're trying to describe this bird, so you can get roughly the proportions. This one and this one. So mine is not very good. The next thing you do is you stick an eye in somewhere near the middle of the head. It's somewhere about equal distance between the beak, the front, and the back of the head here. So you just put in a little eye there. Oh yes. You can probably use this for fish as well. Some of these aquariums are very small, so make them as big as you can. Some of it, the smaller it is, the bigger your mistake will look. So if you do it big, you can adjust it more easily. Okay, next thing is you look at the beak and just draw a line, roughly the length and the shape of the beak. So in this case, it's about the same length as from the eye to the front of the head, and it's straight. So just draw a little beak there, something like that. Maybe mine's a bit long. Okay, beginning to look like a bird. Should be. It's okay, it's the process that's important. Okay, now you join up the head and the neck, the head and the body. Just join that up. And if you have an eraser, then you can just kind of get rid of these lines now, but it's okay to go. Then we want to stick something on the back end of it. So just a triangle there that's roughly the same proportions as here. There's more than one piece of paper. Is anybody ready to sing the national anthem? Okay, now we need to put the wing, so you notice that the wing here is a line that kind of runs from the back end straight and then goes up following the contours of the crest there. So, oh no, sorry, the legs. Do the legs first. So just two sticks roughly bent near the top. So this bit is short, this bit is long. Something like that. Again, so if this is a live bird, you don't know how long it's going to stay there. So the emphasis is on speed rather than careful accuracy. Okay, now we put the wing in. Just draw a line from the point to the back end, and then up a bit. Good. All right. Awesome, great. I'm not going to make any judgments. Yes, Just try that. That's good. Look at that. Oh my. Fantastic. Yes, I recognize it.
The best drawing is getting a shot.
Okay. You have now drawn a bird. And now, you can, if you have an eraser, you can just get rid of these lines.
Ask get a shot to hit the best drawer. Best drawing get a shot.
No, it's not about the result, David. I'm not going to give prizes.
No prize?
No prize. No.
Instead.
Okay, so now this is where we start to fill in this blank. We look at that. I normally start with the head, so I look at that head, and I think, well, it's got a bit of a dark spot just behind the eye there, so I put that in, and a bit of a dark spot in front of the eye, so I put that in there. And then I noticed that it has a bit of an eyebrow and a darker top of the head, so I put that in. And then I noticed that this bird has a little bit of like a necklace around the neck here, so I put that in. And then we get to this part, and this part is very complicated. So what I do is, usually, I try to draw one feather, and try to focus on the pattern of that one feather. And then I've also put in some of the darkest area under here, and there's a bit of white. I noticed that the grey is along here, but there's some white here, and there's a few spots just here which I put in here. So you're drawing what you see, not what you think should be there. And also I noticed this rather darker line where the wing is here, so I just fill that in a little bit there. And now I just add very short, quick notes. So I don't expect you to be able to read my writing, but I put here yellowish, plain grey, whitish, dark grey, grey and yellow streaks. And that's it. That's my field sketch. Finished. I'm sure you can do that. So, now you know how to do it. This is your turn. Not this one. So, just to give you another example, sometimes it can be helpful to understand what you're looking at on the bird if you learn some basic topography. So, learning, for example, where the mantle is, where the scapulars are, where the coverts are, where the tertials are, the secondaries and the primaries, can just help you to make sense of what you're seeing in this very complicated area here. And so in this case, what I might do is just try to describe one feather in each group of feathers. So, same thing again. And then I've just drawn in the basic areas of the mantle, the scapulars, the coverts, the tertials, the primaries. And then I just draw one feather. One feather in the scapulars, one feather in the tertials, one feather in the coverts. That's it. Because I don't know the bird is going to stay for very long. I just want to find out what patterns am I looking at in each part of the bird.
All the patterns of one feather are the same?
Not always, but generally speaking, yes. So if you find that there are different patterns in there, then try to capture the different ones. But if you find that, in this case, more or less, this group are the same, this group are different from this group, but they're more or less the same within this group. These feathers are the same patterns, so then I just, no need to do all of them, just do one. Okay, now it's your turn. The bird has just landed. You don't know how long it's going to be there for, so get sketching!
No way. One egg, two egg,
Bebas aja. Cuman udah disediain.
three egg.
You've had a whole minute so far.
It's feeding, it's feeding.
Yeah, it's been very cooperative, this bird. But it might not stay for much longer, so try to see as much as you can. Get it down on paper as quick as you can. Don't go for artistic. Go for detail. Suddenly an eagle comes over and it flew off. Oh no! So what do now? What you do is you write down as much as you can remember, as quickly as you can, but don't write down anything you're not sure of. Don't just try to fill in the whole thing because you want to fill it in. If you can't remember what it looks like, leave it blank. So fill in as much as you can remember right now, as quick as you can. It's not coming back. So write, scribble notes or whatever you need to do. The goal is to capture as much information as you can. Alright, your memory is starting to fade already. So when you've written down everything you can, what do you do next? Well, this is when you start to check your identification. Don't bother with the identification until you have gathered as much information as you can. So again, we start by narrowing down. First of all, what kind of waterbird was it? Was it a duck? A large wading bird? What was it? It was a, okay, well it was a shorebird first, and then it was a sandpiper, yes, well done. So which group of sandpipers do you think it was out of those? Anyone? The larger sandpipers. Well done. It was one of the larger sandpipers with the long legs, the distinctively colored legs. So now we look in the book and we find that there are 5 fairly regular ones that we might possibly expect, and always start with the commonest one, but the rarest one. But have a look and see if you can figure out what the bird is.
Non-breeding.
Not David Lee.
Iya,
Not Phil Round. Anybody else?
Non-bleeding. Tadi putihnya dominan dari kepala.
Ada hitamnya sini kan?
Hitam.
Ya, ini hitam sekali gitu. Ini saya ingat.
Dia putihnya dominan.
Dan non-bleeding.
How many of you think it's this one? Put your hand up. If you think it's this one, how many of you think it's that? One? Okay. How many of you think it's this one? One? Two? How many of you think it might be this one? Nobody? How many of you think it might be this one? Woo! So, that works. Yes, well done. So it is that one. It's the Marshall one. Now you were lucky because you had the bird stationary in front of you, and you had a table, and you didn't need to use binoculars. But let me show you what it looks like in the field. If you could show us that video.
It's a great benefit because you don't need to hold it. And what I'm doing now is I've got the bird in the scope and I'm quickly looking at the bird and then looking down to try to put down as much as I can remember of what I see onto the paper. So the trick is to retain the image in your mind's eye long enough to get it down on paper. And this is a skill that can be improved with practice. The more often you do this, the better your mind will be at retaining an image long enough to put it down on paper. At this point, the bird has flown off, so I'm no longer looking through the telescope. I'm just trying to, as fast as I can, fill in all the details I can remember while it's still fresh in my memory. So this is critical. Once the bird is gone, to put it all down. Now, the bird has come back again, so I start a new sketch. Now I'm looking at the bird, looking down to sketch a little bit, looking back at the bird, looking down to sketch, and so on. So I start off with the traditional sort of egg shape, positioned fairly centrally in the page, that's the body. And then I'm just looking and just trying to draw the shapes that I see through the scope a little bit at a time. Initially I'm just trying to block out the main shape and proportions of the bird, so the head, the body, the tail. The wings, or one wing, that I can see. I can't actually see its feet because it's turned slightly toward me. And then I start to put in some of those smaller feather tracks, the median coverts, greater coverts, primary coverts, that will just help me to position the bits of colour, if you like, although I'm actually just doing it in pencil. Now the mantle, just a line there separating the mantle from the scapulars. And now I'm going back to the head. Quite possibly this part of the head is turned back towards me, so now I can see it. So usually I'm working on the bits of the bird I can see. If it turns its head away from me, I work on the body. If it turns its head back to me, I start working on the head. And now I'm just putting in the bill and the eye, trying to get the proportions right. One tends to focus on the head a lot in any way, so the details of the head are somewhat critical, so I'm filling that in a bit more detail. Still looking up at the bird and then back down to my paper. Noticing the most obvious field marks, the slightly dark crown and the shaggy crest. Just filling it in, I'm giving it a rough. And then noticing the pattern of the white around the face and the pale brown on the nape. Just very quickly as I can, filling in the detail. It's a fairly plain, featureless bird on the upper parts, so I'm just checking each part as I go. Actually now, I think the bird is now left, so now I'm rapidly trying to fill in all the details that I can remember before I forget them. Once I've done a basic sketch, I then may start to add some brief notes on colours, because I don't have colour obviously on this sketch. So filling in some of the things, for example, yellow vent and yellow undertail puppet up there. Some of the coloration of the upper part. And I'm also flipping back to a sketch I did earlier, because now the bird has maybe come back and turned itself, and so I can fill in more details that I didn't catch the first time round. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. So I hope hopefully that gives you an idea of the process, that we actually can't remember much when we can't see it. So I'm constantly looking, sketching, looking, sketching. Turn off the YouTube. Don't just look at it and then sketch for 5 minutes, because you won't be able to remember. So constantly referring back to the bird and then adding a bit, and then the next, okay, where's the next part? And then looking at that, adding it bit by bit by bit. The second thing I recommend is to build up your knowledge of one site over time. Now you may already you may be a manager of a site, in which case that's your site. But if you don't have a site that you are managing, then find one. And it doesn't need to be a very good site, but it should be somewhere that's close to where you live, so that you can go there. It doesn't have to be all day, it can be half an hour at the end of the day or before you go to work. And we call that a local patch. It's a place that you visit often. That's the key. You get to know this local patch really, really well. And it's for me, it's how I learned. If what David says is true, which is not, but but if I learned anything, this is how I learned it, by going to one site a lot and learning about the birds I see. So, for example, since I moved to Miri in Sarawak 4 years ago, I've been to this site about 172 times. So roughly 40, 50 times a year. It's not that, I mean, it's like once a week, essentially. So once a week I try to get down to this place and observe and photograph, take notes and count. It's actually not a fantastic site for birds, but it's my laboratory, if you like. It's where I learn. So you learn what birds to expect and where to find them within the site. You get to know the common species really well, so when something uncommon turns up, you know, oh, that's something unusual, because you know the common species really well. You can build up your fieldcraft skills, and the most important thing is you're spending a lot of time looking at birds. Over the course of a year, you're spending many, many hours in the field. And sometimes you get to find something unusual. And when I say unusual, it doesn't mean a rare bird, but maybe an interesting piece of behavior. For example, over the course of 3 years, this bird turned up on the 19th of April 2021, this one turned up on the 18th of April 2022, and this one turned up on the 20th of April 2023. We don't get many of these ruddy turnstones. So a male ruddy turnstone turned up on practically the same date for 3 years running. So it's not a banded bird, so I can't say for sure, but maybe this is the exact same bird coming back on a very regular schedule to the same site every year. Here's another bird, a Eurasian curlew. It first arrived in November 2022 and it stayed at the site for 11 months, and it was the only curlew at the site. So what I was able to do was to trace the molt. So when it first appeared, it was in juvenile plumage, and then over the course of the following 11 months, I was able to track the way that the molt progressed. And so I learned a lot of information from just looking at one bird over 11 months. It's a simple example. Here's another individual bird. So these are, I showed you this slide in the online session. So this is one single oriental credit cold chick, which I followed from egg to fledging, which took 22 days, and I tried to photograph it every 3 or 4 days to to track the development of the plumage. And actually, this kind of information is nowhere in literature. So this is an opportunity to contribute to what's known about the species. Another type of comparison I do is that on this case there was a flock of Kentish plovers, so I tried to photograph every single bird. And I looked at the difference in plumage. So on the left here are the females, on the right are the males. But look at the difference in the size of the bill between these two birds. And you know, look at the shape of the breast patch here compared to here. There's another very big bill bird, small bill bird, etc. So just by focusing on one little flock of about 10 birds, or 12 birds, no, 16 birds, yeah, but actually looking at the variation on a single day. The next thing you can build up is your knowledge of bird sightings over time. And so one of the things I absolutely recommend is you keep personal records. And the best, in my opinion, the best platform to do this is eBird. It's something I mentioned in the online sessions. By recording every time you go out, you submit your records, and then you can build up a pattern, or you can build up an idea of what's happening over the years. So I have not been there for that many years, but over the past 4 years at least.
You sure not?
It's not 4 years.
I'm not that old, David.
You hide your age, well.
Yeah. But I mean, I can now look at this and say when I roughly expect to see some of these birds, because every year they come at around the same time. And so it's all about getting to know your site, getting to know how the site is being used, etc. Way back in 2006, when I was living in Penang, there was a construction site that I visited regularly, and I began to, this is where I really began to learn about shorebirds. And just doing simple analysis, so in this case, I just put on a map where the shorebird roosts that I knew of were. So this is the one I was looking at, but I knew there was a site here and a site here. And then over the season, from August to March 2006 to 2007, I plotted the total numbers of birds, and what I could see was there's a peak in migration in September, and then as the birds travel further south, numbers go down again, and then they go up again in March as they start coming back through to the north. So this kind of local information about your site will really help you to understand how birds are using the site, and will also help you with some of your management ideas that Mr. Sir was talking about earlier. And this is just another one where I track the appearance of the first adults and the first juveniles. So once I learned how to tell the juvenile from an adult, I started to plot this on a graph and see that juveniles generally come in about 3 weeks after the adults. And yeah, it's another way of organizing and reorganizing the information that you collect. And it helps you to learn from whatever you, maximizing, making the most of your learning.